Welcome back to our channel, and I'm going to take a more serious tone for this interview. As you've noticed, we are live from Paris Blockchain Week 2025, and we've tried all week to get you the best people sitting in that chair, bringing you the most important news when it comes to shaping the market. I'm joined right now by Fredrik, the CEO of the Cardano Foundation, and we were just talking, and he mentioned something that stuck with me. Nobody's interested in what blockchain can do to help and create a better future for all of us. Everybody's interested for all the bad things around it. So that leads to the conversation we're about to have to discuss what can blockchain do to better our lives. Fredrik, thank you for the honor of sitting down with you. It's amazing, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation. So let's just kick it off. You've been visiting a lot of people in the past week. You've been sitting down with a lot of people, and you came away from those conversations that they're not interested in the positivity. Why is that?
I think it's about human nature, right? So when we wanna read about some scandals, we wanna see what's bad, we wanna have a good laugh at other people, right? But I think what's truly unique about the Bitcoin community and also parts of the core blockchain community is we are in here because we have a strong belief that we can do better. We have a strong belief that we can change the fabric of society and the fabric of finance and social systems. We have a strong belief that it's not about who says you can be a part of it. Everybody should be a part of it.
Exactly.
And we are fighting every single day towards that bright future where we can enable the 2.5 billion people who don't have access to the technology we take as granted, right?
Yeah.
And to a strange part, right? We have the first generation blockchain, Bitcoin.
Yeah, there we go.
Who was all about that, right?
Yeah.
But when we look sort of in the evolutions coming after that, it lost the narrative. It became much more like, trading. It becomes much more about, short-term economic opportunities. Very few people had the opportunity to do some yield farming. So basically you had information asymmetry. You knew more about what's happening right now than the rest of the market. And the tail end takes, the hit. You earn a lot of money, but the tail, the people who come in late, they take the hit. And we had that before. That's TradFi, right?
Exactly.
The big hedge fund managers, the BlackRock of the world, right? They had access to information which the rest of the market didn't have. They had access to liquidity pools. Yeah. They could trade in OTC ways. They had dark pools and stuff like that, right? Yeah. And the way I look at it, right? This is not what Bitcoin is made for, right? This is not why we love Bitcoin. But when you look at what the DeFi ecosystem in Ethereum, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hits now, right? In a weird way, they are not as transparent as we wanted it to be, right? No. They are not actually living up to the creed which we were dreaming about when we thought about we can create economic opportunities. We even went into a situation that, private and permission blockchain is the way forward because adoption must be through the banks and AML and KYC. And I agree that, we need to protect certain people, right? Not everybody has the privilege and education, but I think there's a different way to do it. And I think that's why I'm always coming back to saying, it's about first principles. What was it we were trying to achieve? And can we still do that? And how can we, put some more positiveness into it, right?
That question you just asked, can we still do that? Based on the amount of damage that has been done already, what we just talked about with all the meme coins and all the damage that's being done with the rock pulls, the scams, and can we still do that? Can we still get back to the core?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
And the road is going to be longer than we wanted, but we do take a big derail with the second generation of blockchains, right? And we are still struggling in understanding, the difference between first generation and third generation blockchains. And now we have sort of these CK rollups and other things. But in my world, yes, we can do it. And let me give you a set of examples, right?
Walk me through.
So we work in Eastern Africa. We work together with a team there. And one of the large problems they have is that they don't have a centralized property register. So all the village chiefs, they have the knowledge from their father and from their father and from their father to basically, who owns what, how much land, what land, and those kind of things, right?
Okay.
And when you're sort of in a tough spot, right, you sometimes, take the man and you go in and you take out the village chief and then you redistribute the land. It's an old thing, right?
Yeah.
Now,
it's been happening for a long time. All over
and for whatever reason, the state has decided not to do anything about it with a centralized property registry, right? So they basically, we had a team, not from the Cardano Foundation, but a team of Cardano people and Bitcoin people, right? Who walked from village to village, onboarded 2,000 chieftains, and every single day now we fill up a block. There is real estate transactions and so on. So this is becoming de facto a decentralized real estate register, right? And we can see now that there is less violence. Isn't that amazing?
You know what I find a little bit ironic? We'd never get these examples brought to light.
It's called Landano. So if you want to look it up, it's called Landano. They also work now in Ghana, but Ghana actually do have a centralized real estate register, so it's slightly different, right? Then give you another example. So let's move continent, right? Sometimes it's good to do that, right? So I know that proof of work is very near and dear to most of our heart, and Cardano is a proof of stake blockchain because we are not trying to create an asset. Cardano, ADA was never meant as an asset. No. Bitcoin is different, right? And so we use proof of stake, right? And back in, I think in 2021, we delegated to basically a proof of stake operator, right? A pool operator in Argentina. And he was really happy about it. He's very passionate both about Bitcoin, but also about Cardano. And he basically used that delegation to do a strategic collaboration with the largest engineering school in Argentina. And they basically did a Cardano lab where they teach about Bitcoin and Cardano. And they are now spitting out engineers who is specialized in smart contracting language on Cardano. But what about the job opportunities, right? So I went there and I spoke to Entre Rios, which is the third largest region there. And the governor there, he's under a lot of pressure, right? Argentina, right? The whole world is saying, can this really work? Is this, all eyes are there, right? Yeah. And he's saying, I need to create job opportunities outside the capital. So he says, I have these, and I had this engineering school which had blockchain engineers who needed a job. And he said, well, I'm going to clean out the largest governmental building in the center of the city, sort of like a palace or something like that. Right? So he's cleaned that out and he's creating a startup environment there. And we then brought a South American development bank, so a bit like the World Bank, brought them to the table and they said, we have more money to spend, but we need to ensure that the money has a return. Not a return of investment in the classical sense, but if I build a school, is there students in the school in the next 10 years? Right? That's a good point. Which is a good point. If there's a bridge we build, are people using the bridge? Exactly. And one of the things Cardano does really, really well, because we borrowed that from Bitcoin, is UTXO, more specifically extended UTXO, which allows you to basically put Internet of Things and sensors and other things into the blockchain, right? Which you can't really do in the same aspect of scalability on an account-based model. So we now created this part where we have a development bank who's ready to invest. We have an empty space and a governor who wants to create job opportunities for people in blockchain. And we have an engineering university who's spitting out blockchain developers who needs a job and don't want to necessarily travel away from Argentina, but want to stay there and fight. And remember, Argentina actually did one of the first Bitcoin wallets back in the days, right? Yeah, they made a real good attempt at it too. Yeah, they were really first movers in Bitcoin, right? So what we're seeing now there is that the ecosystem comes together there, right? And having a real shot at creating job opportunities, creating a new future, and creating more investable opportunities for development banks in that area using blockchain. For those of you watching, my question was, how do we fix it? Yeah. And these are the examples that we're getting. And let me move to Europe, because Europe is hard, right? We're Europe right now, right? This is our home. Yeah. We are in Europe, we are Europe. So to fund some of those development banks, how that works is that the nation states basically says, I'm going to use some money to give to a development bank, and the development bank is going to fund some projects, right? This is done through something called promissory notes. Okay. Promissory notes is a kind of a debt instrument where I say I will over the next X amount of years I will give you $200 million for you to do this because I'm interested in infrastructure development. I'm interested in emerging economies and so on. It's a modern IOU. Yes. This today is working on paper. Okay. This is paper who is taxed between the European Union, between the Central Bank of Germany, between the politicians, between the World Bank. And there's two ledgers. There's a paper ledger with, let's say, the World Bank, and there's a paper ledger with the Central Bank trying to say, how much of what the politicians promised did I actually pay? Okay. What they did is they did a blockchain-based version of that, like a ledger, like we know, right? Like on Bitcoin, right? Like a ledger. And then the banks are saying, oh, but this is a private ledger. So that means you have the right to change the content of the ledger. Yes. And they're like, yeah, but it's really great, it's digital. It's like, wow, you know, couldn't we do that in a way where everybody has to agree on a change and nobody can just change it? And you know what's that called? That's called a public permissionless blockchain, which Bitcoin was the champion of, and now Cardano is another type of that, right?
So it's the same thing.
Yes, but it's also quite different, right? Because now by doing that, right, hopefully we will get into a situation, right, that much more of that money can flow through the development banks and they actually know what the actual
Transparency becomes very clear.
Yes, right?
Everybody can actually be part of it.
Yeah. So we just sent in that offer to the Bank of International Settlement, which has actually been quite against public permissionless blockchain.
Yeah, I can understand
because they
why.
were really interested in saying, you know what, our clients, the central banks, actually now are interested in public permissionless in technology. Now, will we win this? I don't know yet. But the fact that they're asking us, and normally we were the bad guys, right?
Exactly.
The fact that they're asking us is a wind of change, right? And that wind of change means that there is hope. Not only hope, but we're actually seeing progress.
And you know what the thing is? There's the same thing that happened yesterday. We had an institutional adoption panel. Santander was there, Börse Stuttgart was there, Galaxy, and that's exactly what you're saying. They're on stage now at a crypto event, which usually, as a bank, you wouldn't want to be. So the wind of change is great. Now, if we move on from that part, and I ask you, for example, do you think there will ever come a time where politics and geopolitics and all of that stuff stop affecting Bitcoin as a market and Bitcoin and crypto as a market? I'll give you an example. The government of the United States does something, market goes down. Government reacts, market goes up. Do you think we could come to a point where the blockchain is unaffected by all of these external changes?
I'm actually going to touch a little bit on that in my keynote in about 30 minutes, right? But I am a bit skeptical.
Okay.
So one of my large worries right now is that the depth of crypto assets, even the depth of Bitcoin, is not sufficient.
Oh. Okay.
And why is that an issue? Because when you look at like the GDP of a nation state, or if you look at the balance sheet of a nation state, there is quite a few nation states or private players or semi-private players like the BlackRock of the world and so on, right? And if they put their mind to it, right, they can move crypto.
They can control it.
They can control it, right?
They can control.
And the question suddenly becomes to me, you know, this general adoption thesis, like, you know, is it really good to have an ADA ETF? In general, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it good to have a Bitcoin ETF? Yeah, it's sort of pretty good. Would it be better that people have a non-custodial wallet and they actually learn to take responsibilities and nobody can take away their money? Well, that would be actually better, right?
So we should be good.
And having some kind of a split between it, right? That we are not killing the non-custodial wallets with like the travel rule and other sort of nonsense like that, right?
Yeah.
But that we actually sort of encourage people to have a split between, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, some of my money may be going into a money manager who does certain things, and maybe due to regulation, that means that if I want to have Bitcoin exposure through that or ADA exposure to that is through an ETP and ETF, that might not be too bad. But I'm a little bit, we are sort of, if I might say, we are a little bit half pregnant at the moment. We are not. I mean, and you're in a better place than me because you represent Bitcoin magazine, right? And I'm Cardano. ADA, the market value of Cardano is way less, right? But we are a little bit half pregnant, right? The actors out there are so big that they can still run around us if they really choose to. So instead of trying to stop us, they can just basically mass adopt us and then they control us. Yeah. And that's the reason why Cardano has gone to do this on-chain governance, right? Yeah. Where we have this tri-party agreement. We went and we wrote a constitution to protect it, right? And we have a quite sophisticated way to ensure that you cannot take over Cardano in the same way as you can with any other assets. But we still haven't solved like the equation of one ADA, one vote, right? So we need to go towards a more like quadratic voting to ensure that whales do not decide and so on. And I think that's...
And spread the decision making to everybody.
Well, not necessarily to everybody, but ensure that not one person, or like the emperor syndrome we call it, yes, that you can basically be a real evil actor and you can take over something who was made for good, like as a force of good. And I like to think that Cardano and Bitcoin stand in the same boat. They are a force for good. Cardano is not trying to be an asset class alone. We didn't create ADA to be an asset class as such. We created ADA to be the ticket who gives you citizenship on Cardano and gives you access to compute power where you can build up your economic identity, right? And I think Bitcoin could be a lot more than it is right now, which is not necessarily bad, but what is so strong about Bitcoin is it becomes such a strong asset class, such a knit community. It's never been down, right? Cardano has never been down since 2017, right? But we're also borrowing so much from Bitcoin. We don't try to be an asset class, we try to be the compute layer, and we would love, for instance, to be able to be the smart contracting layer of Bitcoin, and we're working towards that as the Cardano Foundation and as the Cardano ecosystem, right? And what we don't necessarily like so much is sort of the derivative of Bitcoin. When you start doing restaking and those things, because then you're starting to touch the fabric of Bitcoin, right? I like to see pure Bitcoin, and I would like to see a computing layer with no tokens in between, where you can do escrow accounts and all sorts of things, right? Because then you can actually think about, well, maybe Bitcoin could be the world's reserve currency, right?
Yeah, it could.
And it could be a really good one, right?
In essence, yes.
Yeah, because it has a long track record, it's never been down, it has a very strong governance, right? Meaning that you don't change the source code and the source code is working, right? And as a reserve currency, you don't necessarily need something which has a high TPS or something. You need something which is extremely stable and where people agree to it. So for every block who's ending right now, you make that value proposition stronger, but you need some programmability. And with
to keep the balance.
Yeah, and I think that's where maybe there is an opportunity between Cardano and Bitcoin, and where we can bring the two communities together. Where we are sometimes struggling a little bit is that some of the OGs, right? We tend to be very pure, right? And I used to say, we need to learn how to collaborate. But now I would like to say on another statement, we should not collaborate just to collaborate. We need to collaborate for a great picture of what the world can become, and not for how do we optimize economic benefits tomorrow, or how do we move, a political decision next week. We actually need to have a vision. And I have to say we are sort of lacking a larger vision for how permissionless technology can shape the world for better, because we keep being derailed by these sort of new cycles, whether that's the meme coins or the NFTs or whatever it is.
Market derailed. Yeah.
What we should be looking at really is the fabric of society, and I think that's where the OGs of the Bitcoin society has been standing really strong, and I really cherish that, and I really love to engage with that, right? And I think that's where Cardano potentially could contribute to that world, because we are closer than we are apart.
To summarize it, very simply put, we need to collaborate for a long-term future of the community and the ecosystem itself. According to Fredrik, CEO of the Cardano Foundation, I would like to thank you. I know you have a keynote.
Oh, thank you.
It was a pleasure. It was an honor. And you kept your word. It was amazing. And then that's why I told him when he came back, I did not think he would come back. And you told me something very interesting. This is what's restoring people's faith in crypto and in Cardano, because you keep your word. And we appreciate that. You know what to do. Share this video, like this video, and we will keep bringing you the people who are changing the ecosystem and pushing it forward. Thank you for tuning in, and see you all soon.